This Week in Connecticut with Dennis House starts now.
Welcome to This Week in Connecticut. Greetings, everyone. I'm Dennis House. Thanks for joining us this Sunday, July 24th, 2022. We are in the height of summer, but despite the heat, candidates are out there knocking on doors. And the big U.S. Senate debate is coming up on Tuesday. We'll have a preview in a moment. Plus, we visit a worldwide company headquartered right here in Connecticut. Also, the First Lady comes to our state, and we flash back to when John F. Kennedy got involved in Connecticut politics. Themis Claridis, Leora Levy, Peter Lumage battling to take on Senator Richard Blumenthal. Which Republican is the best candidate? We'll discuss with Hartford Current columnist Kevin Rennie.
I don't think the race is going to be very close.
We take you inside the test tower of elevator giant Otis.
So Otis is the world's leading elevator and escalator manufacturing, installation, and service company. And Dennis, we move 2 billion people a day. So think about this. Every 4 days, we move the equivalent of the world's population with our products.
What's the history of the elevator? Because it's been around for a long time. Cannabis sales are getting closer and closer to reality.
This is really, I think, unique in the sense that that Connecticut launched its market with social equity in mind.
The First Lady comes to Connecticut.
Say thank you to our teachers.
And we look back at some rare film of John F. Kennedy before he was president.
That our possibilities are pointed out and not have them move to other parts of the country.
What then Senator Kennedy had to say about politics in Connecticut. First up on This Week, The Lead. Election season is upon us, and News 8 is hosting an exclusive series of debates for Connecticut's biggest races. The first is the race for the U.S. Senate. 3 Republicans are looking to challenge Senator Richard Blumenthal and unseat the longtime Democratic incumbent. They will meet face-to-face in our studios right here Tuesday night, where they'll go head-to-head on the key issues impacting the people of Connecticut. Now, here are the candidates we are talking about, starting with the front-runner, former House Republican leader Themis Claridis. She won 59% of the delegates at the recent party convention. Claridis led the GOP minority caucus in the State House from 2015 to 2021. She currently works as an attorney. The 57-year-old filed paperwork earlier this year to run for governor, but switched gears once Republican Bob Stefanowski entered the race. Next up, Leora Levy, a member of the Republican National Committee from Greenwich. She earned 23% at the state GOP convention. Now, Levy is Cuban. Her family fled the Castro regime back in April of 1960. The 65-year-old is running as a conservative on social and foreign policy issues. While she's not held elected office yet, Levy worked at the State Department and was nominated by former President Trump to be ambassador to Chile, but the Senate never took up that vote. Finally, we have Peter Lumage, a Fairfield immigration attorney and a businessman who earned 20% at the state Republican convention. He's entered the political ring a few times before, running for governor in 2018, Secretary of State in 2014, and for the U.S. Senate in 2012. Lumage was born and raised in communist Albania. He is 54 years old. He emigrated to the U.S. with his siblings and went on to graduate from the City University of New York. And joining us now to provide some insight into the race and the debate is Kevin Rennie, Hartford Current columnist and author of the website dailyructions.com. And Kevin, thank you so much for being with us here today.
You're welcome.
Let's do a little bit of history. So the last time a Republican won a Senate race in Connecticut was 1982. Lowell Weicker. Why the drought?
Well, he lost in 1988, and the Republicans really since the Clinton era that they have not really been able to elect. They have not been able to elect a United States senator. They've not really been able to come close to electing a United States senator, and that tracks with much of the trend in the Northeast that accelerated under George W. Bush of Republicans losing offices in many places. And the Connecticut Republicans, though they had a long run with Governors Rowland and Rell, they haven't been able to elect a governor in 12 years against an unpopular governor in Dan Malloy. So there is a very strong predisposition against Republicans in Connecticut, particularly for those who are running for the Senate and the U.S. House. The some voters will vote for, Democratic voters will vote for a Republican for governor, but they don't want to send Republicans to Washington to bolster the national Republicans who are so out of sync with what people in Connecticut believe.
And the state has changed so much because back in the 50s, both senators from Connecticut were Republicans, Prescott Bush and William Purtell.
Yes, and you know, in the 50s, we had the party lever, which meant when you went into the voting machine, you could, in those days, I think you had to pull a party lever. And so when President Eisenhower was winning Connecticut by huge margins, he brought along all sorts of other Republicans. It wasn't unusual for the Republicans to win every House seat in the state, and then 2 years later, lose every House seat. The party lever really had a big effect on down ticket offices.
A little bit later,
who was running for president really mattered.
A little bit later in the program, we're going to hear from then Senator Jack Kennedy about that and an old flashback coming up. But let's talk about this race. First of all, let's talk about Senator Blumenthal, the incumbent. What is his status right now? He's ahead in the polls. Is he vulnerable at all?
He is. I think he's far ahead in the polls. I don't think he's vulnerable. Others disagree because they see his favorable rating is much lower than it used to be. But I think when you put him up against the reality of a Republican in a party that is undergoing a shocking crazification period, that Connecticut voters are going to, in all likelihood, stay with Richard Blumenthal.
So let's talk about the three Republicans who are trying to run against him. They'll be debating this Tuesday. Let's begin with Peter Lumage. Tell me about him.
Peter Lumage has run for statewide office several times. He was nominated once for Secretary of the State, and in, I think, 2014. Ran an okay race, but he's run for other statewide offices, including United States Senator before. And I don't see that he's really added to whatever his following was when he started 12 years ago. And that's a long time to be running for offices and not winning.
Next up, Leora Levy.
Leora Levy was very much an establishment Republican, a member of the Republican National Committee from Connecticut, a big Jeb Bush supporter in 2016, and then just became a wild-eyed, strident, angry Trump supporter. He nominated her for an ambassadorship in Chile, and the United States Senate declined to confirm her. And she tried to run for the state Senate in Greenwich in a special election last year, and the Republicans rejected her. And she has been spending, I think, about $800,000 of her own money. And she has made a splash, certainly, with, you know, she is an immigrant herself from refugee from Cuba, and yet she seems to despise and loathe refugees who are coming to America now to seek the same opportunity and pursue the American dream, just as she did 60 years ago. She just she is sort of a case study in the madness of Republican establishment figures.
And finally, we have the endorsed candidate, Themis Claridis.
Yes, served 22 years in the State House of Representatives, and now is an advocate of term limits, 12 years in the U.S. Senate, and is trying to capture this moment of, I think, what she perceives as discontent. She won the Republican nomination in May at the state convention, but not by nearly as much as was expected. None of these candidates going into the August 9th primary, according to their most recent campaign finance reports, no one has very much money. They have a few $100,000 each, and that's not very much for a statewide campaign that includes the New York media market. Richard Blumenthal has over $8 million in cash on hand. So whoever wins that primary is really going to begin at a significant disadvantage, in addition to the more than 400,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans in Connecticut. But they want to try to make a mark. The national Republicans are defending a lot of seats across the country. I don't think they're going to have cash to spare for Connecticut.
In your judgment, who do you think is the strongest candidate to take on Senator Blumenthal? Who would give him the closest race?
I don't think the race is going to be very close. I think probably Themis Claridis is more in line with general Connecticut voters' philosophy, and that she supports gun control. She's been a strong advocate for abortion rights, and I think that those are issues that can sometimes attract crossover voters. But they have any voter who supports that, they're probably happy to vote for Richard Blumenthal, and they're going to hear a lot more about Richard Blumenthal than they would about Themis Claridis. They would say history tells us that state representatives are not nearly as well known around the state, even if they've been the leader of their party's caucus in the legislature, as they think they are. They're pretty obscure figures for the over 1 million voters that we have in Connecticut.
Kevin Rennie, Hartford current columnist and the author of the must-read blog and website DailyRuctions.com. Kevin, thanks so much for being with us.
Especially lately.
Very lately, yes indeed.
Yes. Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, Kevin. Now, the GOP Senate debate will take place Tuesday night at 8 o'clock live on our sister station, WCTX, and it will also be streamed live on WTNH.com, so you can watch it on your phone wherever you may be. Now, to our other top story this week, the First Lady of the United States here in Connecticut. Dr. Jill Biden and Education Secretary Miguel Cardona spent quite a bit of time in our state at a summer learning program on the campus of Albertus Magnus College in New Haven. Normally, this 6-week program would cost a parent $6,500 per child, but with American Rescue Plan dollars, it is free. News 8 Chief Political Correspondent Jody Latina was with the First Lady and has more on her visit.
I'm excited. I'm from New Haven. We don't get opportunities like this.
Joyce Hines and her 2 kids, 8-year-old Kennedy and 6-year-old King, are excited meeting First Lady Dr. Jill Biden.
I work, so and I'm in school as well, so I don't have the time where I could sit down and, work with them on this and that and that. So this is a supplement of school for them.
Both kids are enrolled in a free 6-week summer learning program. Federal American Rescue Plan dollars pay for the enrichment.
And say thank you to our teachers.
Connecticut has received more than $1 billion in federal money for education. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona says summer slide is real, especially coming out of COVID. Catching up is critical.
We know when students, we call it the summer slide in education, right? But these students are not having that summer slide, and we know the pandemic made it worse. So these programs are critical.
Horizons, a nationwide nonprofit, received nearly $200,000 in federal grants. They serve 1,000 students in the New Haven area, like 6-year-old Bryce Rose. Before this, his mom, who attends college at Albertus Magnus, would juggle trying to find babysitters.
He has been learning a lot more, and he's doing really good. He's excelling.
Last summer, Connecticut awarded nearly $9 million to programs around the state. This year, $12 million. Governor Lamont and lawmakers have put more funding aside for next year.
ARPA funding aside that we can tap into for next summer, so we're already thinking about that.
Reading, one of the building blocks for a bright future.
Because your president and I love you very much. So keep learning. Have a great summer.
For This Week, I'm Jody Latina.
Still to come, it's a company that keeps people moving around the world, and it's headquartered right here in Connecticut. Next, how Farmington-based Otis Elevator has risen to become a world-class manufacturer and a leader in the industry.